Question time. PFT PM Posse, is Jimmy Johnson on the way out at the Fox pregame show? His presence or lack thereof the last couple of years has been noticeable. I don't know. I don't worry about that. He's done when he's ready to move on, and or Fox is ready to move on. But I think he's 80 now or close to it. He's been doing it a long time. It's a way to stay connected to the game. He's got a valuable perspective, and that's up to Fox and up to Jimmy Johnson as to how much longer that's going to last. But I've seen the complaints that Fox maybe needs to, cycle out a little bit, get some fresher perspectives from people who have been in the league more recently than Jimmy Johnson. He hasn't coached in 27, 28 years. He was with the Dolphins through 1996, I believe. Could be wrong, possibly wrong. Wouldn't be the first time today. Wouldn't be the first time probably this show that I was wrong. But you see that argument, and I think maybe the same thing's going to happen at CBS, where after the season, maybe it all gets blown up except for maybe Nate Burleson, everybody else gone and cycled out. Because that's the challenge for any former coach or player who transitions into the media. You've got to find a way to stay anchored in the game so your opinions are relevant and fresh and timely, and that they reflect how things currently work in the NFL. And for a lot of players, it's very difficult to shift from player mindset to fan mindset. You have to bring a fan mindset to it. You have to bring a curiosity to it. To the extent that what's happening exceeds your own personal experience, you've got to be willing to find out from friends, from colleagues, from people you know, from people you've met while working in the media. Use those relationships to keep the saw sharp, to keep your knowledge fresh and current, because otherwise you're telling stories about stuff that happened 30 years ago. The game's changed. The game's changed dramatically. Every network needs analysts who are clued in to what's happening currently. So the longer you're in media, the greater the obligation to harvest and maintain and nurture those relationships that allow you to understand exactly what's currently happening in the National Football League. PFT PM Posse, do you think we'll start hearing players forego the NFL draft this year because of NIL money? If so, will it have a material or noticeable impact on the NFL and or the draft? I don't think it's going to happen with many, but it's going to happen with the players at the top eventually. Someone's going to say, I won't sign a contract with you and I don't need to because I have 10 million, 15 million, 20 million in the bank from my NIL deal. It gives a player a degree of security that he never had before. I don't need your money. I've got my money. Oh, and I'll keep doing commercials. I'll continue to be around. I still have a name that people want to be associated with because they know I'm coming to the NFL eventually. So I'll sit out a year if need be. That's what Caleb Williams might do. Rob Buffalo, hi, Mike. Similar to the Tepper discussion on PFT Live this morning, do you look at the behavior of NFL owners with other teams and how the football operations are run? Terry Pagula with the Sabres, Stan Kroenke with the Avalanche and the Nuggets, Josh Harris with the Devils and the 76ers. I think that there's relevance, big picture, as it relates to how an owner that has multiple teams deals with issues with one team. I think that's very relevant because it's not like you're dealing with these issues all the time. So anything you do under the broader umbrella of sports ownership is potentially relevant. I mean, look, Tepper's fired a couple of coaches from his MLS team in just 2 years of existence of that franchise, and he's fired 2 coaches in 2 years with the Panthers. I think it's transferable because it's the same people making these decisions. So yes, I think it's fair to look at how the other organizations are run. People are looking at how Josh Harris ran the Devils and the 76ers when he took over. How long of a grace period did he apply before he started making big changes? So I think it's highly relevant because ultimately it's the same people. Tom Marshall with the current crop of quarterbacks in the division, is the Titans head coaching job now the toughest? Well, they could have something in Will Levis. Now, he looked good at first. It's kind of, plateaued, regressed. But you've got C.J. Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, and Anthony Richardson. That's a tough division moving forward. And that Titans job could be a tough one. And, at a time when so many people are talking about whether or not the Titans should want to move on from Mike Vrabel, I think the real question is whether or not Vrabel should want to move on from the Titans, especially if the Patriots are interested in bringing him home. That is something I'm definitely keeping an eye on as the season works its way toward a conclusion. Another one from Tom Marshall, will the potential availability of Bill Belichick affect this year's hiring and firing cycle? It will, but I firmly believe and I explained this yesterday on Rich Eisen's show, and I think I've talked about it here in the past. It's all going to be set up before we get to the end of the season. Somebody asked Bill Belichick this week if he already knows where he's going to be next year, and he said that's ridiculous. Well, it probably is too early for him to know for sure, but he's never going to admit if he knows, when he knows, whether he's going to go here, there, or wherever. I still think by the end of the season, before it's time to activate the formal process of trying to trade for Bill Belichick, there'll be a loose understanding of where he wants to go, who wants to hire him, what it's going to take to get him to go to that team by way of money and by way of power, and what it's going to take to get the Patriots to allow that team. When the team makes the formal phone call requesting permission to talk to Bill Belichick and negotiating the terms of whatever it would take if they hire Bill Belichick, what the compensation would be, I think those questions will already be resolved ahead of time, informally, and this will just be the formal process that plays out. And I think the reality is, watch the first couple of days after the season ends. If Belichick doesn't leave the Patriots through a firing, a retirement, a resignation, or a mutual parting, if he doesn't exit then that's when I think we sit back and wait for the possibility that someone will make the formal request, and it will play out a few weeks down the road that Belichick goes to a new team and that the Patriots get compensation in return. And as I say that, there is a possibility of like the Sean Payton scenario where Belichick leaves on his own, and before he's allowed to go somewhere else, a team would have to work out compensation for him. I hadn't thought of that before. That's possible. The problem, though, is it's kind of hard to drive a hard bargain if you're the Patriots in that scenario, because if you want too much, I was saying this with Sean Payton last year when they were trying to negotiate a deal with the Saints and the Broncos for Payton to become the coach in Denver. If the Saints want too much, all Sean Payton has to say is, fine, I'll be back to work on Monday. Because the only reason that the Patriots in this case, or the Saints in Payton's case, can get anything is because they still hold the player or the coach's contract. Fine. I'll honor my contract. I'll come back to work. Put me back to work. And that would potentially, if it plays out that way, and I'd like to think that after 20 plus years together, it wouldn't be an ugly parting where there's a power play and it's awkward and who's willing to push this all the way to the limit. I'd like to think they just work it out. But there is that other path where Belichick leaves, waits for someone to approach him, knowing that before they could hire him, before they could even talk to him, in theory, they'd have to have a deal in place for the Patriots on what it's going to take to get him. Understanding that once a relationship ends, the Patriots necessarily have less leverage because Belichick's option, worst case scenario, would be to say, hey, you want a first round pick? You want this, you want that. You're trying to keep me from going to a new place. I'll just come back and coach until you fire me. And then if you fire me, I get to go wherever I want to go. Dr. J, 144, am I the only one who likes seeing the Texans being rewarded for not tanking last year? Lovie Smith, unlike when he was in Tampa, did try to win that final game last year. Houston ended up better off by winning the game and getting C.J. Stroud. May as well try to win them all and forget tanking. That meshes with a point that Sean Payton made on PFT Live right after he left the Saints when the issue of tanking came up. His point is you should never do it because it introduces a losing mindset to your organization. And that's not good for anybody. The players who will be there after the tanking has concluded, after you get that first overall pick, they will have been warped by the experience because the team didn't try to win every single game. And the players believe there's a loser's mentality in the organization. And one of the reasons why you don't do that is there's no guarantee that that guy that you qualify to get by tanking is going to be your savior. So, yeah, this year is an example of tanking not working, of having that first overall pick and it not yielding the best possible talent. So in a roundabout way, the Texans did get rewarded for not losing that last game of the season. It's just too uncertain. It's too much of a crapshoot. Why try to lose games? I've said many times, there's no good business reason to try to win games once you know you're not making it to the playoffs. And the way you tank isn't by telling your players go out and play poorly. It's by saying we want to evaluate how these younger players are going to do. But, the players get a sense when a team's trying to win and when it isn't. And that is the thing that can be a detriment moving forward. What kind of culture are you trying to create in an organization? And if the players sniff out the idea that you're not trying to win all your games, that you're willing to lose now in the hopes of winning later, that could make it a problem as you try to turn the page on that year in which you tanked. All right, I want to see what else is here. I should probably wrap this up. I'm factoring in, as I go about 40 minutes into this, the reality that the Javon Holland interview is part of this too. Scrolling and scrolling. Dr. J144, are you seeing enough from Kyler Murray since his return to pass on drafting a quarterback and get help for Kyler Murray instead? I just think that that's a decision the Cardinals are going to have to make. It's the same as the decision that the Bears are going to have to make about Justin Fields. What do we do here? What do we do? And I've said this before. There are three types of teams in the NFL. Teams that have franchise quarterbacks, teams that don't, and teams that have a quarterback that may become a franchise quarterback. We just need more time. Fields and Murray fall into that category. How much time do you give them? How much longer do you go before you call it? And the risk of calling it is, number one, that guy you draft may not be as good as the guy who you just had. Number two, that guy you just had may be better somewhere else, making you look like a moron for giving up on him. And number three, remember this. And this is something that I'm urging all teams to be sensitive to. The amount of pressure you're putting on the new guy. The Panthers put a ton of pressure on Bryce Young by trading from number 9 to number 1 and giving up everything they gave up. A ton of pressure on Bryce Young. The 49ers put a ton of pressure on Trey Lance, giving up everything they did to go from 12 to 3 and draft the guy who was going to supplant Jimmy Garoppolo, but not right away, maybe after a year. Oh, we'll try him here. Oh, we'll try him there. Oh, now he's the starter. Oh, he broke his ankle. Oh, we're done with him. It's just too much pressure to put on a kid. You want it to kind of happen organically and naturally, but remember, if you're one of these teams that has a guy that you're not quite sure and you decide he's not going to become a franchise quarterback, we're going to try to draft one, you're putting extra pressure on that player. Now, the flip side is, hey, if this guy's the real deal, he'll welcome it and he'll thrive under that pressure and he'll become the guy that we need him to be. Let's see. Here's an interesting question. Logan Mapes. Could the Panthers and David Tepper be the ones behind the pre-draft slow processor test scores of C.J. Stroud to sell more people on the decision to draft Bryce Young? See, I thought all along that the crap that was being spread about C.J. Stroud was being spread by someone who wanted Stroud to drop so they could get him. I hadn't considered the possibility that the Panthers were the ones spreading it just to make the selection of Bryce Young look better. But, here's the reality. Whatever you do pre-draft, the guy's eventually going to play. And the proof is going to come from that. And so far, it's been pretty conclusive that C.J. Stroud, the far better option to Bryce Young. But I hadn't thought about that possibility. It was the Panthers that were putting it out there. J.C. Carm, how does Scott Fitterer keep floating under the radar? He's been there through all the Panthers coaches and quarterbacks. Doesn't he bear some of the responsibility for this mess? Yes, but if he's just doing what David Tepper wants him to do, why would you fire him? Now, maybe you get to a point where you fire him just so you're creating the impression you're doing something to make things better. But, I frankly think one of the reasons Howie Roseman has survived as long as he has in Philly, he's kind of found a sweet spot where Jeffrey Lurie's involved, where Jeffrey Lurie is making decisions, and Howie Roseman is the one who's taking the heat when those decisions go poorly. You need someone like that if you don't want to take the ultimate responsibility for these bad decisions. Although the way that David Tepper spoke yesterday, he made it clear the buck stops with him. So he doesn't seem to be somebody who's afraid of taking the heat. We'll see how he feels after he takes the heat for a little while longer after everything that's happened in Carolina. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.